Hello and welcome to the ostensibly 5.1 test server. And we are guessing what we're going to do here. We are just about to research for 178,000 XP one battleship Izumo, the Japanese Tier 9 battleship, which then can be purchased for 15,900,000 credits. I'm going to actually spend some free test server gold here, get a commander for this, because it's become impossible to retrain commanders on the live server by this point, and so I'm not going to bother doing that. And so, yeah, Izumo, unequivocally the worst ship in the entire game, and something that I'm doing on the test server because I have no intention of ever playing this on the live server. If I do proceed down the Japanese battleship line that far, I'm going to save up enough free experience to literally skip this entire creature. Just looking over to why we are not retraining here, because it's thoroughly infeasible with actual experience and such. You see, you need 5 million to retrain off of your battleship expert. So 5 million experience, yeah, that's a no. That's not happening in the real server. Now, so welcome to your Tier 9 battleship. And we see right away you need 104,000 experience to delete the hulls, plus another 16,000 for the engines. So you have 120,000 experience for your hulls. And for a Tier 9 ship here, you're facing... This is where you have the first problem with Izumo. AP shell, 410mm AP type 90. This is your stock round. Now you'll notice something here. Go over back to Amagi, the Tier 8 Elite. 410mm APAC Type 91, it's not using the same shell. And that's complicating because the Izumo never existed, its guns did not exist, so you don't really have any idea what this shell is. And I'll just save you some time there, it is a bad shell. And in order to get the actual useful ammunition on this thing, you have to spend 44,000 experience, to research the ammunition that you were using on the Amagi and also back on the Nagato, who, yeah, that's your Tier 7 and your Tier 8 ships. Well, the Americans start with the Tier 8 battleship is not a retrograde, and the Tier 9 is an upgrade from their Tier 8, so enjoy that there. 410mm 50 10th year type. This gun is completely fictitious. The Japanese never made it. And this is the Nelson class battleship, which looks a lot like the Izumo, and it's a British battleship that will be in the game shortly. And you see it has the turrets forward, but they're all pointing forward while the Izumo has one pointing aft. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. It has the same thing with lots of heavy secondary weapons and aft to try to make up for no turret. These are various proto-Yamato designs that were considered. You can see Izumo is Model D here. And Izumo was part of the project what we call Izumo was part of the project A140 design study that ultimately led to becoming a Yamato. And that's where you get into the real problem here, and also why I showed you the Nelson class. The Nelson class is a 35,000 ton 9x16 battleship with pretty heavy armor. The Izumo is a battleship that has 9x16 guns, all forward in the same arrangement, with the exception of one of them is pointing aft, and armor comparable generally to the Nelson and to the New Mexico American Standard class battleships. But there's a slight problem with that. Looking at other things with the Izumo here, you start out with a main battery range, 19.7 kilometers, which is not terrible, of course. I've previously stated I don't think that there's much benefit to super long-range shooting in this game, particularly with heavily armored ships. But it's worse than anything you've seen on the Nagato and the Amagi. And you have to drop this and 4 million credits. So you're up to a 20 million credit project upon buying the ship, plus 44,000 free experience for this to be remotely playable. I'm even on the test server. I'm not going to play this with the stock rounds. There's plenty of video out there of what the stock Izumo rounds do, and the answer is nothing. They are incredibly terrible, uncapped, poor AP rounds that are competing against the American super heavy 270-pound armor-piercing ammunition Mark 7 guns on the Iowa. So there's no point in that. And this hull is nothing but an experience sake. If you look at the actual changes beyond the ridiculously poor guns that you have to upgrade fast, it's all you're doing is you're adding passable anti-aircraft and an additional secondary battery. That's all this change is, because the Izumo was never actually built. This was a 1930s design. Study loosely here, and I'll talk more about that later. That led to the Yamato, which of course the Yamato was built the way it was. So we're just opening, going into a battle here, test server matchmaking, and with test server experience, where you notice we have the X60, and that's off of a very high base as well. So the goal in test server matchmaking is usually just to go out and do some damage and collect enough experience to elite your ship. And so that's what I'm doing, that's what a lot of other people are going to be doing here, and that's just the way that is. So we also have the Izumo here on the art, and that looks, again, you're seeing like the Izumo is a promoted ship on the art, so does that mean it's good? No, it's terrible. And if you're looking for a short and swift version of this Izumo review, is that it's an absolutely terrible ship. It has a 44% win rate. You should not play this thing. So again, test server matchmaking here. More action in a tier 10 game than you're ever going to see on the live server at the moment, because the grind is very punishing in 8, 9, and 10, and so people aren't bothering with it. And the aircraft carriers are punishing. People don't want to bother with that either. And that's another factor that factors into how unpleasant Izumo is to play. So here's Izumo in the flesh, and you notice something here. It's huge. Izumo is incredibly huge. It's the same size as Yamato, as if it was the Yamato prototype for some reason. And they really want it to be Yamato prototype, and it has an enormous amount of stuff in its physical size and layout that are in common with Yamato. But the problem here, and this is the fundamental problem with Izumo, is that despite being all of the bad things about Yamato, which are that Yamato is very, very large and has this kind of shot trap thing at the back of the plane, and by far the largest beam and stuff. Izumo has armament and armor comparable to a 35,000-ton battleship, whereas this design study was always working with ships in the high 50s to 60,000 to up to like 70,000-ton range final displacement of battleships. And so why is that? And we're just steaming here, and two brothers, and I'm not going to, it's a tier 10 game. I don't have much anti-aircraft. I'm not going to get away from the fleet here. I'm going to try to go over to the 1, 2, 3 line area, because that's a little less exposed, and there's no anti-aircraft to speak of over this way. So forget that. Talking back, though, about Izumo, is that this ship should weigh, based on its hit points and its physical size and everything, this should be a 60,000-ton battleship. And it's a 60,000-ton battleship that has only 9x16 guns, and they're all in this incredibly suboptimal forward configuration, and it's a very bad forward configuration, because while the Nelson fundamentally has one blind spot where the turret can't turn, the Izumo has two. It cannot fire. It's meant to do its swing through facing the conning tower, and we're just checking out the range here with scout plane up. Like, okay, this is why I don't think that the short range stuff really matters, and you could not possibly need more range than that. This is not practical anyway. But getting back to what I was talking about with the turret, is that the aft turret rotates like it's an aft turret and is through the conning tower. So it's stop, as you will, the part where the turret can't actually rotate 360 degrees on a warship, is up against the barbette of the forward turret, whereas Nelson has both the stop and the can't fire arc up against the conning tower. That's superior, because when you have to turn Izumo, your turret will not be rotating like the other two turrets, even though they're all in the front. Your turret will have to rotate like it's a rear turret, even though it's in the front. And that's frustrating, and you'll see that very, very shortly here, that in terms of what this guy can actually mean. So you see the turrets, we're now pointing port side, waiting to see if we can get anything to shoot at, watching airstrikes. So in terms of the tonnage again versus Nelson, Nelson's 35,000 ton treaty battleship. This thing, comparable armor, comparable armament to Nelson. Inferior armament to Iowa. Inferior layout to Iowa. This ship does not use its tonnage. And you can see the guns themselves are not... The upgraded guns here, they're using the Izumo model guns, which didn't exist, which have no historical reference point, and the Nagato Amagi ammunition. These are fine. We're shooting longest practical shots you're going to have, typically, here on Two Brothers. And we're shooting, and I know this is a reckless place to be, and my ships are already turning around. I'm going to have to turn around here and try to get away from a bunch of people playing Tier 10 battleships and Tier 10 other ships with no concern. But I got some hits, and that's all I really wanted, because you'll see how the experience multiplies. So Izumo has the armament and armor of a 35,000 ton ship, despite the fact it has the physical size of... It's clearly intended to be a Yamato in terms of its physical everything. Taking some shots at Ogami there, hit him. But it does not use that displacement in the game. And then you see the problem here with the wide hull. When little ships are shooting all that HE at you, it's just complete free fire. And this is not survivable. I know this is not survivable. We lost the one battleship that was over here. We tried to turn away. I'm trying to turn. I'm not fast enough to get away. I'm not going to survive this. But again, 7 hits will pay for an elite ship just fine. So now we're turning here, and we're going to pass the point where Izumo can't fire to the rear because all its turrets are in the front. So there's a bad thing about that I'm going to explain later. Right now we're just taking high explosive ammunition, so it's not super important, but it's still degraded by this. And you see the turret swings through there, the aft turret swings through there like it's an aft turret, but it still can't fire because it's looking at the conning tower. So I go completely blind there and being able to shoot, and fire back with 3 shells and miss, because that's what 3 shells I want to do in this game. The other turrets have to rotate around the front because they're like front turrets. They're not set up to through rotate to the rear, even though the top one in particular would have the space to do that. But battleship turrets can't rotate 360 degrees. If you look at the if you consider the engineering involved, you'd understand why. So it's a design sacrifice, and that goes back to what we're talking about here with Izumo, who is now sunk. Mostly by high explosive fire. So in case you're wondering why people don't like high explosive fire in higher tier games, yeah, that's why. There was very few armor piercing shots that actually hit me and penetrated. That was almost all high explosive ammunition. And you can see the front turrets never got around to shoot back at the arc as I was completing a turn. So Izumo is in battle. And while I'm waiting for that, this is the other stuff that was ostensibly on the 5.1 server. Mission upgrades, challenges, events. Like they're making it more like World of Tanks, where there's individual mission grind, daily missions, and increasing the rewards and stuff for this. And that's fine. That's more interesting gameplay than it has had. Like again, with World of Tanks with the personal missions made things substantially more entertaining if you weren't into clan wars. And you'll see you get rewards here for your achievements. Set fire to 10 ships. So this is the sort of thing as an entry-level thing here on this HES server that you can do. Mythbusters for some reason. I don't know what we're talking about here, but you see when you complete these, you get flags. Like Equal Speed Charlie London is good. Secondary battery upgrade, the speed boost, and so these are rewards for doing your little challenges and such. And there you can get a module upgrade, which is nice. That's free, and which is good because it costs money to demount. And then if you complete this one, you get really nice stuff: gold consumables, flags, everything. So yeah, the rewards are not bad, but this was completely overshadowed in 5.1 by an absolutely disastrous mechanic change that I have a video of later that has completely wrecked the game at the moment, and why I'm audioing and rendering this video rather than playing World of Warships at the moment, because it's pointless. And here we go. This is what people know 5.1 for. This was done by a player testing the 5.1 Iowa against a bunch of very vulnerably placed Miyoko heavy cruisers. And if you know how live server how this goes, the Iowa scores multiple Citadel hits and destroys a cruiser that is dumb enough to do this in one salvo. However, yeah, all hits, 12,000 damage, broadside, no Citadels, and very few full damage armor-piercing hits, even though you see that shot there. And we're taking another bunch here that I clipped through the reload there because there's no point in showing it, but it's the same thing. The Miyoko is essentially transparent. The armor-piercing shells are completely failing to take out the Citadel or even really detonate inside the ship, even if they're going through stuff that intuitively on the model, and on the model, in addition to intuitively, should have things in the way. Like those shots should be going through the boiler room, and they're at the waterline. And yeah, so that's what we did there. We completely broke Citadel and armor penetration mechanics, so the game's unplayable at the moment. So good job, Wargaming. That's what your new patch is known for, rather than its bonus stuff. So now we're going back to something that I didn't shoot while I was on the test server, so I went back and shot it in my port on live to do some comparisons here. And here's our Izumo Tier 9 battleship. 95 survivability, 87 artillery as stock, 38 anti-aircraft as stock. These are all the stock numbers because, again, these are ships I haven't gotten close to researching, and I have no intention of ever playing it on the live. Now we're going to look at what you play as an American. Contemporary design in many respects would have been contemporary construction. Survivability 86, artillery 91, air defense 55. Maneuverability gets a huge boost here to 43 when you research the engines. And you notice something else here. It's got about the same hull research requirements as Izumo, but it doesn't need that for the guns. It starts with very, very good guns. Higher range to start with, and they're the 2,700 pound armor-piercing Mark 8 shell coming out of the Iowa Mark 7 guns. It does not have crappy stock weapons. And it's also thinner than the Izumo, like across the board. Yeah, these have longer range. They have the 406mm AP Mark 8 that is used on the Montana. And this is the Tier 8, the American North Carolina, which I also haven't gotten up to yet. I'm taking my time on the live server because I don't like the 8, 9, 10 economy. And 406mm AP Mark 8. Yeah, there is no penalty from going to 8 to 9 on the American line at all. None. Zero. And this is such a huge hit that if it wasn't for Yamato existing in the Japanese line, you would never play the Japanese line. The Izumo is that big of a disadvantage of this thing. You see the conventional layout of Iowa, and it's got this huge 3-gun hard turret in the back here. And that's important because the Iowa turret face and barbette and turret sides and just is a huge surface that one is very unlikely to be penetrated by armor-piercing ammunition coming in from the rear going towards the Citadel, and two, will not take damage from high explosive ammunition. So not only do you not have the shot trap of the Izumo hangar here, because the Iowa doesn't use that hangar structure, you have a huge barrier behind your Citadel here with the Iowa turret and barbette that is almost impenetrable, and by anything you're going to survive anyway. But Izumo doesn't do that, and so has the giant soft spot here on the rear. This is entirely vulnerable. You can see there are lots of people who will back up with Izumo rather than actually try to churn with it, because one, you have the shot trap there, and you don't have a turret, and you have a big, big, fat open deck with a lot of anti-aircraft guns for being hit by high explosive ammunition, which will detonate and therefore can set you on fire. High explosive ammunition that doesn't score a damaging module hit is not as likely to set you on fire. So, looking here. So why is Izumo so bad for its tonnage? Well, there is no explanation for this other than Wargaming intentionally made it to suck this bad because it leads to Yamato after 250,000 experience and 120,000 experience of its own, and you're supposed to free XP it to get this beautiful, badass Yamato ship. Which, again, the survivability is very, very close. This is supposed to be about the same tonnage. It's not. I mean, it doesn't have more armor than an American standard. It has armament comparable to an Iowa or an Nelson. And it uses the Nelson's weight-saving forward turret configuration. The only reason that was done in the Nelson was as a treaty confirmation. And of course, someone who's building the Yamato to SWAT American standard battleships to equal up a qualitative what you can't do with quantitative does not care about the naval treaty limits. The Yamato is double treaty weight. So, Izumo versus Iowa. What has Wargaming actually come and done here? Worse layout, worse engines after Iowa's engines were nerfed. Iowa's engines are not as good as they were historically. Comparable HP and worse armor. Iowa has better turret armor than Izumo does, better conning tower, and generally better scheme overall. Worse firepower, comparable AA after Iowa's was nerfed again, and far worse stock grind at tier 9, and that's very important. It's at tier 9. You will lose money on almost every tier 9 match, even with premium account, let alone if you don't have premium account. So your tier 9 grind will be very, very long. And again, Wargaming took this ship which never existed and is almost entirely made up because the Japanese destroyed all the Yamato design files. And moreover, it has these 16-inch guns that they're like, well, hey, the Japanese were planning on building this as a paper thing. They weren't. There's no reason to build a battleship this size unless you're going for 18-inch guns. The U.S. Naval Intelligence concluded that the first time they saw recon footage of the Yamato. It's like, this doesn't look right. There's no reason you would make a ship that big and that wide if you're going to go 9x16. You should assume that this thing has 9x18. And that was actually the first hint, as we spend another 5.5 million credits and 60,000 experience here to elite the Izumo, that the Yamato might be quite dangerous if you wound up engaging, because the Americans did not know that the Yamato had 18-inch guns, because even though they were breaking the Japanese codes that had great intelligence penetration, the Japanese referred to the Yamato's 18-inch guns as 16-inch guns throughout the design process on all paper records. And so Wargaming took that as an excuse, even though the Japanese were probably never serious about building it, with how everybody was already building 16-inch battleships, and Japan was planning the 18-inch number 13 class battleships prior to the naval treaty. They weren't going to build 16-inch guns on their killer battleship. That's ridiculous. This was never going to actually be built as it is. So Wargaming interpreted it as, let's make the worst possible ship we could possibly theoretically justify by saying, like, we're going to undergun it for its tonnage with this number the Japanese never made and probably were never serious about, given the other aspects of this design and what they ultimately built and what everybody else was building. So all the historical information points one way. Let's go the other way, though, because we have this quasi-justifiable reference, because it'll make the ship more aggravating to play. They also seem to have nerfed the armor, because this thing does not have armor that's substantially tougher than a standard class battleship, which is very fine armor, but the standards are almost half the size of this thing in tonnage, and they're physically smaller, and they're nowhere near as expensive. So that doesn't make any sense either. And we're just looking at like what it costs to outfit this thing in modules. I mean, there's your boosting your anti-aircraft effectiveness there, 3 million credits. And we're spending an awful lot of money here to make this thing lead, as you can tell here. I'm just going to make the guns more accurate here, because I can boost the secondary guns, and Izumo has secondary guns, and so I'm actually going to go with that, because supposedly the secondary armament is what's interesting about Izumo, because it has a lot of it, and it's pretty long range, and it can do a lot of DPS. This is kind of a joke. I mean, secondary armor in this game has been nerfed so badly that it's almost unrecognizable. There's no reason to build a ship around that. And we'll just research them out here for the fun of the test server's gigantic inflated payouts. I mean, I've got gazillions of experience, and I've instantly eluded my captain and all this other stuff, and things that you can't actually do on the live server, because, you're not going to have 3 million experience after playing one battle in Izumo. I mean, you wish. You might have 4,000 if you played really well and won on a daily double, and if you actually got ships you could damage with those stock guns. So this is really just wargaming committing a massive offense against the player base. That's the only thing Izumo is here for. People will try to justify this thing. You cannot justify this, and you cannot justify that it's opposite the Iowa class, and it's going to be opposite the H-39 on the Germans, and it's going to be opposite the probably the Lion on the British. These again are entirely very serious, rather well-built warships that actually use their design tonnage because they were real designs, and they are going to not have this ridiculous case where Izumo is carrying around about 25,000 tons of goddamn styrofoam. So, and so this is the fire map that is really kind of, this looks visually impressive, and it's a very big map. Like you can see, this is a fully upgraded Izumo here. I'm going with the fire control and everything. I can reach about halfway across the map. So this is a big map. This is like 40 kilometer-ish map. There's a bigger one in Trap, which is around 50. So these maps are pretty big. You may actually could consider using your longer range gunfire on ships that have longer range guns. With the proviso, you're still probably not going to hit anything. Here's the Montana, which is a ship that wargaming is handicapped relative to Yamato, and so people will pay lots and lots of real life money to get to the Yamato through the Izumo, because everyone's figured out ever since closed beta that this is a bad ship, and it's bad in a bunch of ways that are just as I've described, that are entirely artificial. This is something the Japanese never, ever would have built. And they were never serious about building a ship, a big ship with this kind of armament and a weight-saving feature that it doesn't actually use, because it's not trying to make treaty limits, and it's not doing anything with the weight it's saving by mounting the turrets in a suboptimal position relative to the Iowa and the ships everybody else is building front and back, and the ultimate Yamato turret configuration. There's only so much to be said about it in that regard. Refer back to the Prometheus clip photo at the start of this thing. And it's just so wrong. Both as a ship of the Imperial Japanese Navy, as a naval design, and as something that wargaming has done to its player base. Because they want you to suffer playing this thing. They really do. They want you to be like, I can't stand this. I'm going to spend quite a bit of money to open up free experience with doubloons. Your doubloons that you can't transfer from World of Tanks, by the way, because that's gold, and we use doubloons because doubloons are only for World of Warships. What a deal! Yeah, fuck that. Sorry about the French. I mean, I have a lot of gold on World of Tanks. I want to use. I also have free experience on World of Tanks. I would definitely gladly use to skip this piece of trash, and I can't. So I'm basically not that interested in writing up the Japanese line, because the Americans have their junk, please spend money ship at tier 7, which, one, the Colorado is not as bad as it used to be. It's gotten some buffs, and it also got a huge matchmaking buff, which actually hurt the Izumo badly, because the Izumo lost a chance to shoot at tier 6 battleships. Well, the Colorado got rid of tier 10 battleships, so guess who wins there? And the Colorado is semi-playable if you don't have to play stock, and it's much cheaper to free experience through stock. Well, yeah, and you can actually plausibly make money at tier 7. It's kind of like trying to play tier 8.5 on World of Tanks on a non-premium account. Like, you can do it if you're good. I've played tier 9 and even tier 10 on non-premium World of Tanks and have made money. Tier 9 and Tier 10 in World of Warships, even with premium, and think about that, even with premium, like you are paying money to play this game, you will lose credits and you will have to grind other ships to pay for your grind on this ship, which you already spent 20 million to getting into a playable state, and probably another, and close to another 10 million fully outfitting it. Speaking of bad Tier 9s, here's one of the few other Tier 9s that's as bad as Izumo in a wargaming game, and it's the Baltimore, which is an anti-aircraft cruiser. Guess what? Anti-aircraft cruiser sucks against fighting ships, and so have fun getting your experience in that, and also winning games in that, because you have to fight ships. Oops. And he's shooting at Izumo, yeah, armor-piercing ammunition, I think, or those may have been high explosive shells that hit stuff that was not flammable. I think those actually are AP rounds. They took out an anti-aircraft gun and some over-penetrated something. So just taking shots at him here. So is it really possible to explain it enough in words, like how damn bad and worthless this ship is? I mean, other than it has by far the worst win rate of any serious ship in World of Warships, and I've spotted this cruiser quite nicely for our torpedo plane, so good night, Mr. Anti-Aircraft Cruiser. Have torpedoes. Great success. You're dead. No, it's just the complete floating whale that you have to, that is the worst ratio of how much you have to play it in a tier versus a where you make money, and how long the grind is, to how decent it is to play. I mean, the Kawachi is terrible. The Myogi is an extremely obnoxious design. Some people actually like it because they feel like it is 14-inch guns and speed and maneuverability. It's like, yeah, well, I'm only playing it for 15 games at best because this is a bad ship. I have no intention of playing bad ships. Life's too short for that. So if you want to get good in Myogi, I mean, I understand how it can be good, how it can theoretically be good, but its design is obnoxious. But you're through it in 15, 20 games. I mean, what do you care? Well, particularly if you've got a weekend with like premium experience bonus and you run a couple of experience flags, you'll get through it real fast. This thing, there is no way to get through fast. You have to spend 170,000 XP to research it, another 120,000 to make it playable, 250,000 to get through to Yamato, which is where you want to go. Then you have to spend 30 million credits, which you didn't make on this thing, to buy Yamato. So you're going to be in this ship for a while. And you're going to hate every minute of it, and you're eventually going to probably break down and spend money to convert free XP. I'm not planning on actually doing that. I'm planning on using our plane here. We got, again, the whole thing like with your plane ranges and stuff. I mean, the Izumo has arbitrarily worse range than its Japanese predecessors, and by far worse than the Americans, because, again, these guns didn't exist. They could be with any stats Wargaming wanted, but let's make them shitty. I mean, they're capable of scoring hits. I hit a Montana there. I've got a stealth destroyer here that I think got sunk. But I'm going to take a torpedo to the bow there. Shimakaze. 15,000. Yeah, the destroyer that is sitting dead in the middle of B there. So he fired those long before he died, and he wasn't even really seeing. It wasn't even seeing me really. So that was just kind of a blind slash bit of a deductive shot on his part. Whacked my bow pretty good, and that's the other fun thing is that with Tier 9, you will play nothing but Tier 10. You'll pretty much play nothing but Tier 10 games because you need to fill up the high Tier 9 and 10 matchmaking somehow, and the population on North American server in particular is really poor on those because of how unpleasant it is to play. So plan to be used for cannon fodder frequently, which is also why I configured this as maximum anti-aircraft. I want to test how it's going to do against the Harks in this game here. Just checking what's been sunk and everything, and firing at a Montana again. Yeah, I hit him there with a legitimate armor-penetrating hit that I'm not entirely sure what I penetrated on Montana, but Montana has some armor defects. And here's a Yamato that's decided he's going to shoot at me. Now, the Izumo angled on like this is a legitimately tough target. It's got, all its barbettes and stuff are up front there. This Yamato is backing up, actually. And I just took some shot. I can't damage a Yamato effectively, really. So I'm gonna hit him there, but I don't think I did anything. So I'm gonna try to get behind this island, cover up, and giant airstrike. I dodged the Yamato there, which is really what you have to do. The Yamato's guns will penetrate your standard class battleship type armor very, very easily. Bombs, boom, boom, double fire. Fun, yay. Another advantage of having a nice fat ship. You actually can be hit multiple times by dive bombers who normally can't hit something that's 10 feet in front of their face. The buffed anti-aircraft is racking up nice here. And yeah, so I wound up being broadside there by the Yamato. You saw how easily his shells penetrated my armor. Those were Citadel hits and full armor penetrations. So I'm not really. He's a 13 kilometers. He'll penetrate my armor. Anyway, he would penetrate another Yamato at that range. And just turning a little bit to deflect those. Lovely deck I have, but I got what I wanted here. I've broken through to their aircraft carriers, and we don't have our aircraft carriers anymore, unfortunately. But we've identified their carriers, and now we can pressure them. And it's very aggravating to actually try to shoot this thing. If you see how fast it's moving, with a mix of high explosive and armor piercing, because I want to set him on fire, but I also want to try to take him out because he's got a lot of hit points as a big carrier. But the only thing you can really do is break through on them, and that's what we've done. So our little cruiser here is probably going to do most of the work, which is fine. Again, this is just basically test server demo. What does the ship work? What's it like playing it? And yeah, it's absolutely as bad as reputation. It's not worth the time. And it really kind of says a lot about Wargaming's design philosophy here. Those HE shells failed to actually set them on fire, despite hitting good targets. That this thing is even in the game. You could have made... the obvious one would have been like a number 13 class, which is a not quite as heavily armored Yamato, minus one gun, and is more... It looks like a big Nagato. You could have made a much better Project A140 because you have a large amount of freedom with that design, because the actual design records and such were just destroyed, and so you could justify all sorts of variations to it, like with the VK4502 Aus B in World of Tanks, which was actually a very light vehicle. Relative, it was like the 4502 is its weight. 45-ton tank. It's close to 3 times that sometimes in World of Tanks. Actually more, well 2.5 times. It's super heavy tank. It never existed. So don't give me a realism excuse for this thing. You could have changed your non-existent, never built prototype with no surviving blueprints that was rejected early in the design process with an unserious anti-air. Yay, torpedoes! I'm dead. Or not. Tier 10 carrier, I mean, there's no point in trying to dodge a Tier 10 carrier in the Izumo. You're not going to succeed. I'm just going to keep trying to push this and distract him and maybe get some shots while that cruiser's trying to finish him off and set him on fire. And now we've spent his damage control party finally, and hopefully we can reignite him and get rid of him. So you could have made this ship better. You really could have. Wargaming didn't want the ship to be good. This is showing what you're up against in this thing and why Tier 9 and Tier 10 are such fun to play in a bad ship. I've got my anti-aircraft. I'm trying to turn into this thing. They bank over to my other side. And here comes another squadron that's going to do a zoop turn. Abort, abort, abort. going for the cruiser, and now I have dive bombers, and they're probably going to actually manage to connect to me because I'm fat. And dead is Izumo's natural state. So yeah, Wargaming wants this thing to be bad and wants you to play it because it's bad and decide to give them money. My personal solution is not to bother playing with it until I've got enough free experience to skip most of the way to the Yamato. And yeah, if only you could get that sort of results on the live server, because not great, but I never got a really good battleship to shoot at there. Damage received. But look at that bill, okay? I didn't even fire that many shots here because I didn't get into a good battleship on battleship exchange with the 7-on-7. The auto repair is 165,000. The ammunition auto resupply is 24,000. I didn't use any premium consumables either. So enjoy being in this thing or not. It's garbage.